Before we begin, please be advised that this presentation contains themes of psychological suspense and existential dread. Listener discretion is advised. There are places in this world that are meant to remain sealed, not because of what's inside them but because of what they keep out. Places that hum with a silence so profound it feels like a physical weight on your ears. The subbasement of the Blackwood University Special Collections Library was one of those places. And for Ethan Hayes, it was just another Tuesday. His job as a junior archivist was a quiet dance with the past. He dealt in forgotten letters, brittle photographs, and the dusty leather-bound thoughts of people long dead. He liked the order of it, the certainty. History, once it's happened, doesn't change. It's the one thing you can count on. Or so he thought. The new acquisition was an anomaly. It came from the estate of a man named Arthur Ashworth, an eccentric recluse who had bequeathed his entire, and very strange, collection to the university. The delivery manifest was a single typed line. 1 curated collection, Ashworth Estate. No details. No itemized list. Just a set of iron keys and a map leading to a room in the subbasement that wasn't on any of the official blueprints. The room itself was a 6x6 concrete box, but the door was something else entirely. It was thick steel and looked like it belonged on a bank vault. It took Ethan and 2 maintenance workers to get it open. When it finally groaned on its hinges, the air that spilled out was cold. Not just cool, but a deep cellar cold that felt ancient and wrong. The inside of the room was even stranger. It was lined floor to ceiling with overlapping sheets of dull, gray lead. No windows, just a single bare bulb hanging from a wire. And in the exact center of the floor, sitting on a simple wooden pedestal, was a book. Just one. It was the size of a large encyclopedia, bound in a material that wasn't leather, wasn't cloth, wasn't wood. It was dark, almost black, and felt strangely smooth and warm to the touch, like polished stone that had been sitting in the sun. There was no title on the cover, no author on the spine, no markings of any kind. It was utterly anonymous. Ethan's job was to catalog it. Accession number, physical description, condition report. He set his laptop up on a folding table outside the lead-lined room. There was no signal inside, and carried the heavy volume out. He opened it carefully, the spine cracking stiffly as if it hadn't been opened in a century. The pages weren't paper. They were a thin, vellum-like material, impossibly white and crisp. But it wasn't the material that made him pause. It was the content. There were no chapters, no paragraphs, no narrative. It was a logbook, an index. Each entry was a block of dense, precise text, prefaced by a date and an exact timestamp down to the second. He scanned a few entries at random. The language was clinical, detached. It read like a scientific observation. Asterisk entry. August 14, 1952. 11:34 and 2 seconds a.m. Subject: Michael Sullivan. Location: Des Moines, Iowa. Event: Subject: a postal worker, misreads a faded address, delivering a university acceptance letter to the wrong house. The intended recipient, Emily Vance, never receives it. Consequence: Vance abandons her dream of becoming an engineer and marries her high school sweetheart. Sullivan is never aware of the error. Asterisk. Ethan frowned. It was weird. A fictional journal? Some kind of elaborate art project? He flipped forward through the decades. The handwriting was unnervingly consistent. A sharp, precise script that never wavered. He decided to start his report. He needed a point of reference. Something current. He flipped to the very back, looking for the most recent entry. The last page wasn't full. The final entry was dated for today. This morning, in fact. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Asterisk entry. October 26, 2023. 7:18 and 41 seconds a.m. Subject: Ethan Hayes. Location: Apartment 4B 212, Oak Street, Northgate. Event: Subject slips on a small pool of water from a leaking refrigerator filter. In the fall, a ceramic coffee mug, a gift from his deceased mother, bearing the image of a lighthouse, is dropped. The mug sustains a hairline fracture running from the lip, through the second E in the word Seattle, to the base. Subject curses, cleans the spill, and discards the mug, experiencing a momentary but potent wave of grief and frustration. Consequence: a minor but significant emotional anchor to the subject's past is severed. Asterisk. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. His heart hammered against his ribs. It was impossible. It was completely, utterly impossible. Every single detail was correct. The leaking filter he'd been meaning to fix. The fall. The mug. He could still see the crack in his mind's eye. A tiny dark line spiderwebbing across the faded skyline of Seattle. He had told no one. He lived alone. He hadn't even spoken a word of it out loud. How could this book know? How could anyone know? His hands trembled as he slammed the book shut. This was a joke. It had to be. A prank. A sick, elaborate prank. Maybe Ashworth had him followed? Put cameras in his apartment? The paranoia washed over him, cold and suffocating. But it made no sense. Why? Why him? He needed to verify. He needed another data point. He frantically flipped back a page, scanning the entries from the day before. His eyes landed on a name he recognized. Jessica Riley. His colleague. The head of the preservation department. Asterisk entry. October 25, 2023. 5:47 and 16 seconds p.m. Subject: Jessica Riley. Location: intersection of 4th and Elm. Event: subject, distracted by a text message from her son regarding a forgotten soccer practice, fails to notice a stop sign. Her vehicle, a blue 2019 Subaru Forester, collides with a red Toyota Camry at low speed. Damage is cosmetic. No injuries are reported. Consequence: subject's insurance premium is scheduled to increase by 18%, causing minor financial strain and significant marital discord later that evening. Asterisk. Ethan remembered Jessica complaining this morning. She'd mentioned a fender bender, said it was her fault, that she'd been distracted. But the details, the make and model of her car, the exact reason for her distraction, the financial consequence, there was no way the book could know that. He pulled out his phone, his thumb shaking as he found her number. She answered on the second ring. Jessica? Hey, it's Ethan. I know this is a really weird question, but your car accident yesterday. You were on your phone, weren't you? A text from your son. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight, defensive. How did you know that? I didn't tell anyone that. I told my husband I was adjusting the radio. Ethan felt a wave of nausea. And, did you talk to your insurance company yet? Yeah, just an hour ago, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. They're raising our rates. Mark is furious. Ethan, how do you know this? He couldn't answer. He just mumbled an apology and hung up the phone. He stared at the black book on the table. It wasn't a journal. It wasn't an art project. It was something else. Something impossible. A record of moments. A catalog of secrets. An archive of knowledge that should have been forbidden. He felt a terrifying pull. An addict's need to know more. What else was in here? What other secrets did it hold? With a sense of impending doom, he opened the book again. He didn't look for a random page this time. His fingers, guided by a cold dread, flipped forward past today's date to the next page. To tomorrow. And there, halfway down the crisp white page, was an entry that made his world stop. The script was the same. Cold. Clinical. Precise. Asterisk entry. October 27, 2023. 2:33 p.m. Subject: Ethan Hayes asterisk. He stared at his own name, at the date and time that hadn't happened yet. His heart felt like it was going to explode. He forced his eyes to read the first line of the description, and the air left his lungs in a single silent gasp. The words glowed on the screen, stark and clinical, a sterile epitaph written in advance. Cause of death: blunt force trauma. For a moment he forgot how to breathe. His vision tunneled, the edges blurring into a dark vignette around the horrifying sentence. Blunt force trauma. It wasn't a prank. A prank would have been something absurd, something laughable. This was cold. It was procedural. It felt official. He slammed the laptop shut, the click echoing in the dead silence of his apartment. His hands were shaking violently. He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor, and stood up, pacing like a caged animal. This wasn't real. It was a virus, a sophisticated piece of malware designed to scare the user. His father, a man who still thought the cloud was a weather phenomenon, had clicked on some phishing link, and now his antique server was infected with this. It had to be. Ethan ran a hand through his sweat-damp hair. He was a data analyst. He dealt in logic, in patterns, in concrete numbers. This was a ghost story, a digital campfire tale. He forced himself to sit back down, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He opened the laptop again. The file was still there, open, mocking him. Asterisk Ethan Hayes. October 12th. 9:17 p.m. Asterisk tomorrow. It was predicting his death for tomorrow night. He scrolled down, his finger trembling on the trackpad. The file was structured like a formal incident report, with headers for location, involved parties, and event summary. All of it was blank, just placeholders waiting to be filled. Except for that one single line under preliminary findings. He had to get out. He had to disconnect. He tried to close the program, clicking the red X in the corner. Nothing happened. He tried again, mashing the button. The window remained unmovable, unyielding. A cold dread, colder than anything he'd ever felt, began to seep into his bones. He tried to force quit, but the application didn't even appear in the activity monitor. It was as if the computer itself didn't recognize the program was running. It was a ghost in the machine. He reached for the power cord, ready to rip it from the wall, but then he stopped. What if that was the worst thing he could do? What if this thing was watching? His mind raced, desperately seeking an anchor in the storm of his panic. There was only one person he could call. He fumbled for his phone, his thumb slipping on the screen twice before he managed to find her name. Sarah Jenkins. She answered on the second ring, her voice a welcome splash of normalcy. Ethan? It's almost midnight. Everything okay? You sound weird. Sarah, I need your help, he stammered, his voice cracking. Something's happened. Something impossible. He tried to explain it, the words tumbling out in a disorganized, frantic mess. The old server, the hidden partition, the strange program called the archive, the file with his name on it. He could hear the skepticism in her silence. Okay, slow down, she said, her tone cautious. Ethan, you've been working too hard. It sounds like you stumbled onto some kind of elaborate ARG, an alternate reality game, or a really messed up prank. It's not a prank, Sarah. I can't close it. I can't delete it. It's embedded in the system. The file says I'm going to die. Tomorrow. Okay, she said, trying to soothe him. Share your screen with me. Let me see what you're seeing. If it's a virus, I can probably isolate it. His relief was so profound it almost brought him to his knees. Sarah was a genius, a freelance investigative journalist who specialized in digital forensics. She could peel back layers of code like an onion. If anyone could figure this out, it was her. He quickly set up the screen share, his hand still shaking as he sent her the link. A moment later, he heard her sharp intake of breath. Whoa, okay, that's not what I was expecting. The UI is ancient. What is this? I told you it's called the archive, he said, watching his own cursor move as she took remote control of his machine. He could hear the soft clicking of her keyboard over the phone. There's no source code I can access, she murmured, more to herself than to him. It's not running like a normal application. I don't know what it is. It's like it's part of the operating system's foundation. She was silent for a full minute, a minute that stretched into an eternity for Ethan. Okay, she finally said, her voice strained. The file. The one with your name. Let me see the metadata. She clicked around, her movements precise and efficient. The creation date is today, a few hours ago, but the last modified stamp is dated for tomorrow, at 9:20 p.m., 3 minutes after the time it lists. What does that mean? Ethan whispered. It means whoever designed this is a master of their craft, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. It's a clever trick, Ethan. It's just code. Is it? He challenged, a new desperate idea forming. Look at the other files. Just click on one. What am I looking for? I don't know. Anything. Sarah navigated back to the main directory. The list was endless, filled with names and dates. Okay, here's one. Amelia Earhart. We all know what happened there. She clicked it open. The file was sparse, containing coordinates in the Pacific and a single cryptic line. Silence is not absence. Weird but meaningless, Sarah said, already moving on. Let's find something more recent. Something we can verify. She scrolled through the list. Wait a second. Here. Cascade Airlines Flight 734. That was that crash in Colorado last year. The official report said it was mechanical failure, a faulty sensor. She opened the file. Ethan watched, his breath caught in his throat. The file was immense, filled with technical data, weather patterns, and maintenance logs. But at the very bottom was a section titled Cognitive Transcript. "What is that?" Ethan asked. "It looks like a transcript of the cockpit voice recorder," Sarah said slowly. "But it's different. It's not just what they said. It's... oh my God." She went silent. Ethan could hear her breathing quicken over the phone. "Sarah? What is it?" "It has the pilot's thoughts," she whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and horror. "Word for word. It's transcribing his internal monologue. The stick is heavy. Why is the stick so heavy? Did David run the pre-flight check on the hydraulics? It lists his thoughts as he's realizing the sensor is wrong, as he's fighting for control. Things he never said out loud. Things nobody could ever possibly know." The blood drained from Ethan's face. This was it. The moment the curtain of denial was torn away, revealing the terrifying truth underneath. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a virus. This was something else entirely. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "The NTSB report. The final one. It was classified, but there were leaks. They said the pilot's final words were, 'Tell my wife I love her.'" "They were," Sarah confirmed, her voice trembling. "But that's not what this says." She read from the screen, her voice hollow. "His final thought, a millisecond before impact, is listed here. Says, 'I left the garage door open.'" A wave of nausea washed over Ethan. It was such a small, mundane human detail. A detail so painfully, terrifyingly authentic that it couldn't possibly be fake. The archive knew. Somehow it knew everything. The silence on the line was heavy, suffocating. The reality of his own file, his own pre-written death sentence, crashed down on him with the force of a physical blow. The clock on his screen read 12:07 a.m. October 12th. Today. His last day. "What do I do?" he asked, the question hanging in the air between them, a desperate plea. "You don't go anywhere," Sarah said, her voice snapping back into focus, sharp and commanding. "Don't leave your apartment. Lock your doors, your windows, everything. Don't answer the door for anyone. We're going to treat this like a credible threat. You're going to stay put, and I'm going to dig into this thing from my end. I'm going to find out who built it." He knew she was right, but it felt futile. How do you hide from something that knows a dead pilot's final thought? Fear was a cold, sharp thing, but now a different feeling began to surface alongside it. A burning, defiant curiosity. Hiding wouldn't change anything. If this thing was real, it was going to happen whether he was cowering under his bed or not. But he couldn't just wait for it. He had to know. "Ethan." Sarah's voice was sharp with concern. "Are you listening to me?" "I hear you," he said, his eyes fixed on his own name on the screen. He moved the cursor, his hand suddenly steady. He scrolled down his own file, past the horrifying cause of death, to the next header. "But I have to know more." His finger clicked. The blank space next to the location of incident header populated with text. His blood ran cold. It wasn't a dark alley or a deserted highway. It was a place he knew better than anywhere else on Earth. Location of incident, 14th floor, Sterling Cole Financial, office 1422. His office. A wave of vertigo washed over Ethan, the kind you get when you stand up too fast, only this one didn't pass. It held him, suspended in a nauseating reality where the mundane had become monstrous. His office. Not just the building, not just the floor, but his specific little box of glass and steel. Office 1422. The place where he spent 40, sometimes 50 hours a week staring at spreadsheets, drinking lukewarm coffee, and counting down the minutes to Friday. The archive had declared it a future crime scene, or an accident site, or something else. The word incident was so sterile, so corporate, yet it pulsed on the screen with a malevolent energy. His hands, slick with a cold sweat, moved the cursor instinctively, scrolling down past the location. He needed more. He needed to understand the shape of the nightmare that was wearing his name. The file wasn't long, but every word was a hammer blow against his sanity. Date of incident, October 26. He glanced at the corner of his laptop screen. It was October 25th. Tomorrow. The incident was scheduled for tomorrow. A knot of ice formed in his stomach. Time of incident, 9:15 a.m. the exact time his first morning meeting always ended. He would be walking back to his desk, probably with a stupidly cheerful Happy Friday on his lips. The sheer, banal specificity of it was what scared him the most. This wasn't a vague prophecy, it was an appointment. He kept reading, his eyes scanning the text, desperate for a loophole, for some detail that would expose this as an elaborate, cruel joke. Personnel involved: Ethan Carter. Sarah Jenkins. Sarah Jenkins. The name hit him like a stray thought. He knew it but couldn't immediately place the face. He typed her name into his company's internal messaging system. Picture popped up. A woman in her late 20s, kind eyes, a professional but friendly smile. Her title was listed below: Junior Counsel, Legal Department. She was on the 12th floor. He'd probably shared an elevator with her a dozen times, exchanged a polite nod, and never thought another thing about it. Why her? What possible connection could a data analyst from finance have with a lawyer from legal that would result in an incident? He scrolled further down the file, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The next section was labeled Catalyst, and beneath it a single baffling phrase: the perpetual motion device. Ethan's blood turned to ice. He slowly lifted his gaze from the glowing screen and looked across his home office. There, on the corner of his desk, sitting next to a stack of mail he'd been meaning to open, was a gift from his brother David. It was a Newton's cradle, 5 polished steel balls suspended in a perfect line. David had given it to him for his birthday last month, a quirky little desk toy, a perpetual motion device for your perpetually busy desk. The card had read. He'd taken it to work, of course. It sat on the edge of his real desk in Office 1422. He'd click the balls back and forth sometimes when he was stuck on a problem. It was just a thing, a paperweight, a distraction. Now, according to this impossible archive, it was a catalyst, the starting point of a tragedy. His mind raced, trying to forge a logical connection. How could a desk toy cause an incident involving him and a lawyer he barely knew? Would it fall? Would someone trip? It was absurd. It was the kind of detail a con artist would invent to make their story sound more convincing. But the address, the names, the date, it was all too real. He felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to destroy the laptop, to throw it against the wall and watch its secrets shatter into 1,000 pieces. But he couldn't. He was snared. He had to know more. His eyes darted around the archive's interface. It was minimalist, almost primitive, just black and white text. But in the top left corner, he saw something he hadn't noticed before. A small blinking cursor in a search bar. With trembling fingers he typed in a name, not his own. He couldn't bear to see his own file again. He typed Sarah Jenkins. He hit enter. For a moment nothing happened. Then the screen refreshed. A new file appeared, structured just like his. But the header was different. It wasn't an incident. It was a record. Subject: Sarah Jenkins. Record type: biographical trauma. Ethan felt a pang of guilt, a sense that he was crossing a line, prying into a life that wasn't his. But his fear was stronger than his shame. He clicked it open. The file was short, just a few lines of text, but they told a story of such private pain that he felt the air leave his lungs. It detailed an event from when Sarah was 9 years old, a fall from a treehouse in her childhood backyard in rural Ohio. It listed the exact date. It named the hospital she was taken to. It even described the injury, a compound fracture of the left femur and a concussion that led to temporary amnesia, causing her to forget the entire day. The file concluded with a chillingly intimate detail. Subject retains a subconscious fear of heights and a faint, crescent-shaped scar behind her right ear, concealed by her hair. This was impossible. This wasn't a prediction. This was a secret, a deeply buried memory, some parts of which even Sarah herself couldn't access. How could this machine, this archive, know this? Who could have recorded this? A story like that wouldn't be in any public record. It was the kind of thing you only knew if you were there, or if you were a ghost watching over a person's entire life. The laptop was no longer just a strange device. It was a violation. It was an omniscient eye that saw everything, the future and the past, the public record and the private soul. And it had placed him and Sarah Jenkins on a collision course. The verification of Sarah's past trauma did the one thing he thought was impossible. It made the prediction about his own future feel undeniably real. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a threat from some hacker. This was a glimpse behind the curtain of reality, a peek at the source code of fate. And his fate was written. Tomorrow, 9:15 a.m., Office 1422. He looked at the Newton's cradle on his home desk, a perfect twin of the one sitting in his office. He reached out a shaky hand and pulled back one of the steel balls. He let it go. Click, clack, click, clack. The sound was hypnotic, a tiny metallic heartbeat in the silent room. Each impact was a second ticking away, bringing him closer to the appointed time. What was he supposed to do? He could call in sick. He could just not go. But what if that made it worse? What if the incident wasn't confined to the office? What if, by avoiding it, he simply changed the venue of the disaster? And what about Sarah Jenkins? She had no idea. She was going to walk into work tomorrow, grab her coffee, and head up to the 12th floor, completely unaware that her name was linked with his in a prophecy of doom. Did he have a responsibility to warn her? How could he? Hi, you don't know me. But I found a magic laptop that says we're going to be in a mysterious incident tomorrow morning, caused by my desk toy. They wouldn't just think he was crazy, they'd call security. No, he was alone in this. The archive had given him knowledge, but it hadn't given him an escape. It had only given him the terror of anticipation. Click, clack, click, clack. He stared at the endlessly swinging spheres, the perpetual motion device, a system where energy is conserved, passed from one body to another in an endless repeating chain of cause and effect. An action on one end creates an equal and opposite reaction on the other. Was that what this was? A chain of events already set in motion? Was he just the last steel ball in the line, waiting for the inevitable impact? He closed his eyes, but the image of his office was burned onto the back of his eyelids. The beige walls, the gray carpet, the sprawling view of the city he'd always found so comforting. And in the middle of it all, the Newton's cradle on his desk, silently waiting. He had to go. He had to know. He couldn't spend the rest of his life wondering what would have happened. He had to walk into Office 1422 tomorrow morning. He had to keep his appointment with the archive. The drive to work the next morning felt like moving through a dream, or perhaps waking from one. The familiar gray ribbon of the interstate, the same billboards advertising personal injury lawyers and fast food breakfast deals, the distant silhouette of the downtown skyline where the Orphic Tower stood like a needle against the pale sky. It was all exactly the same as it had been yesterday and the day before. But David Miller was not the same. Every traffic light seemed to be a question, every turn a commitment. He was a man with an appointment, and it wasn't written in his corporate calendar. He parked in his usual spot on the third level of the garage, the squeak of his tires echoing in the concrete emptiness. He walked to the elevator, his leather-soled shoes making a sound that was too loud, too deliberate. The car arrived with a soft chime, and he stepped inside, pressing the button for the lobby. The mirrored walls showed him a stranger in his own suit, a man with a haunted look in his eyes, a tension in his jaw that hadn't been there a week ago. In the lobby, the usual morning rush was in full swing. Colleagues greeted him with cheerful, oblivious good mornings. He nodded back, the words feeling like ash in his mouth. He scanned his badge, the plastic gate clicking open with a sound of finality. He walked past the sprawling cafeteria, the security desk, and headed for the main elevator bank. He didn't press the button for his own floor, the 27th. He pressed the button for 14. The elevator ascended with a smooth, silent hum. 8, 9, 10. The other passengers got off on their respective floors, leaving him alone. 11, 12, 13. The doors opened on 14 and he stepped out. The difference was immediate and profound. The air was still. The lighting was a shade dimmer, softer. The plush gray carpet seemed to swallow all sound. On the other floors there was the constant hum of activity. Phones ringing, distant chatter, the whir of printers. Here there was only a deep, resonant silence. The hallway stretched before him, a series of identical, unmarked wooden doors. Except for one at the very end of the hall. A small polished brass plate read, 1422. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was it, the point of no return. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around, to get back in the elevator and pretend none of this ever happened. To go back to his spreadsheets and his quarterly reports and the comfortable, predictable numbness of his life. But then he saw his father's face in his mind, The confusion, the fear, the sudden, inexplicable void where a brilliant mind used to be. He saw the file, the single word, redacted. He saw the quiet, knowing gaze of Mr. Abernathy. He walked down the hall, his footsteps muffled by the carpet. He reached the door and stood before it, his hand hovering over the cool wood. There was no keypad, no retinal scanner, no visible security. Just a simple old-fashioned door with a simple old-fashioned handle. He took a deep breath and knocked. 3 soft, hesitant raps. For a moment nothing happened. Then with a quiet click the door swung inward. A woman stood there. She was not what he had expected. He had pictured some dusty, mole-like man, hunched over from a lifetime of guarding secrets. Instead, she was perhaps a few years older than him, with dark hair pulled back in a severe but elegant knot. She wore a simple, tailored black dress, and her expression was one of serene neutrality. Her eyes, a startlingly pale gray, seemed to assess him not as a person, but as a variable in a complex equation. "Mr. Miller," she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was calm and low, with no discernible accent. "We've been expecting you. Please come in." He stepped across the threshold, and she closed the door behind him. The click of the latch echoed in the silent room. The room was as Spartan as the hallway. There were no windows. The walls were a soft, neutral gray. The only furniture was a small, dark wood table and 2 chairs facing each other. There were no books, no computers, no filing cabinets. It felt less like an office and more like a therapist's consultation room or an interrogation chamber. "Please have a seat," the woman said, gesturing to one of the chairs. He sat, placing his briefcase on the floor beside him. She took the seat opposite him, her posture perfectly straight, her hands resting calmly on the table. "My name is Evelyn," she began. "I am the caretaker of this facility. Before we proceed, I need to explain the protocol. This is not a library, Mr. Miller. You cannot simply browse. The archive does not offer answers. It offers context. It is a tool for understanding, and like any powerful tool, it has rules." David simply nodded, his throat too dry to speak. "Rule 1, she said, her gray eyes fixed on his. "You may only access 1 file per visit, and you may only visit once unless you are summoned again. The choice of what you wish to understand must therefore be made with absolute precision." She paused, letting the weight of the statement settle. "Rule 2. You will not be given a document to read. The information will be conveyed to you verbally. You may not record our conversation. You may not take notes. The knowledge you acquire here must exist only in your memory. It is a burden you must be willing to carry alone." David felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. This was far stranger, far more ritualistic than he could have ever imagined. "And Rule 3, Evelyn continued, her voice dropping almost to a whisper. "What you learn here, you must never, under any circumstances, share with anyone who has not also been granted access. To do so would have consequences, not just for you but for them. The archive protects its integrity, Mr. Miller. It is a repository of dangerous knowledge. Its containment is paramount." She leaned forward slightly. "This is your final opportunity to leave. If you walk out that door now, this conversation will be forgotten. Your access will be rescinded. You can return to your life. Do you understand?" He thought of his father, lost in a fog he couldn't penetrate. He thought of the immense, invisible machine of Orphic, churning away in the background of their lives, powered by secrets he was only now beginning to glimpse. Leaving wasn't an option. It had never been an option. "I understand," David said, his voice hoarse. "I want to proceed." A flicker of something, not quite a smile but a subtle shift of acknowledgement, crossed Evelyn's face. "Very well." She reached under the table and produced a single thick sheet of cream-colored paper and a heavy black fountain pen. She slid them across the table to him. The page was blank, except for 1 sentence printed in stark, simple type at the center. It read, "I accept the weight of what I will learn." Below it was a single empty line. It was not a legal waiver. It was not a non-disclosure agreement. It was a statement of intent, a confession made in advance. David picked up the pen. It felt heavy, cold in his hand. He stared at the words, the black ink a stark contrast against the cream paper. He was signing away his ignorance. He was agreeing to carry a burden sight unseen. With a steady hand he signed his name, David Miller. Evelyn took the paper back, glanced at his signature and nodded once. She placed the document back under the table out of sight. A transaction had been completed. "What is the subject of your inquiry, Mr. Miller?" she asked, her tone now purely professional. "Be precise." David's heart pounded. This was the moment. The question he had carried for months. "Project Nightingale," he said, the name feeling alien and dangerous on his tongue. "I need to know what it was. I need to know what happened to my father, Robert Miller." Evelyn's expression remained unchanged. She showed no surprise, no recognition. She simply stood up. "The archive requires a specific query. You have asked two things. Which is your priority?" He paused. What was it? The project or his father? The two were inextricably linked, but she was forcing him to choose the path. What was the root of it all? "Project Nightingale," he said, with more certainty than he felt. "I need to understand the project." Evelyn gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Very well," she said. "The archive will see you now. Please follow me." She turned and walked not to the door he had entered through, but to another, identical wooden door on the far side of the room he hadn't even noticed before. It blended perfectly with the wall. She opened it without a key, revealing not a room full of servers or shelves, but an overwhelming absolute darkness. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was a profound, tangible void. And from within that void came a low, faint hum, like the sound of a universe breathing. My breath caught in my throat. I stumbled back a step, my hand instinctively going up as if to shield myself from the sheer nothingness that lay beyond the threshold. The hum wasn't just a sound. It was a vibration that resonated deep in my bones, a physical pressure against my eardrums. My mind, a lifetime trained in physics and empirical data, scrambled for an explanation. An anechoic chamber? Some kind of advanced optical illusion using vantablack-like materials? But no lab on Earth could create this. This darkness wasn't passive. It was active. It felt like it was pulling the light from the hallway into it, consuming it without a trace. It felt like it was pulling at me. What is this?" I managed to whisper, the words feeling small and useless in the face of such a profound anomaly. Elias Vance stood beside me, his expression unreadable, his posture unnervingly calm. He didn't look at me, but kept his gaze fixed on the void. "You're a physicist, Dr. Finch. You think in terms of matter, energy, space, and time. You're trying to categorize this, to fit it into a box your equations can define. You can't." He turned his head slightly, his eyes glinting in the dim hallway light. "This isn't a place. It's a state. It's not empty, it's full. It's a point where the membrane between our reality and the fundamental substrate of all information has worn thin." I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of disbelief. "The substrate of information? That's theoretical philosophy, not science." "Is it?" he countered, a hint of a challenge in his voice. "Every star that has ever burned, every word that has ever been spoken, every thought that has ever been conceived, it all creates a ripple, an echo. Most of those echoes fade into the background noise of the cosmos. But here they collect. This is not a library of books, Doctor. It is a library of echoes. This is the archive." I took a hesitant step forward, my scientific curiosity warring with the primal instinct that screamed at me to run. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small, powerful flashlight I always carried. I clicked it on, aiming the tight, white beam into the darkness. It cut a brilliant path for about 3 feet and then simply ended. There was no reflection, no diffusion. The beam of light didn't hit a back wall. It just stopped, as if it had been cleanly severed. I moved the beam back and forth. The effect was the same. The light was being devoured, erased from existence the moment it crossed the threshold. My heart hammered against my ribs. "How?" "The rules are different in there," Vance said simply. "Light, as you know it, requires a medium, a space to travel through. In there is no space, only information. That's impossible. And yet, here it is." Vance gestured toward the void with an open palm. "You came here seeking answers about Dr. Evelyn Reed. You believe she uncovered something, a secret so profound she was silenced for it. You were right. She wasn't just studying the archive, Dr. Finch. She was its most brilliant student, and its greatest cautionary tale." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The hum from the void seemed to intensify, a low thrum that felt like a secret being whispered just below the range of my hearing. I don't understand, I said, my voice strained. How do you access it? How do you read an echo? Vance's lips curved into a faint, melancholy smile. You don't read it. You experience it. The human mind is the key, the terminal. You simply have to ask. My skepticism flared again. This had to be an elaborate trick, a sophisticated psychological manipulation. Ask what? Ask it for the lottery numbers. You could, Vance said, his tone becoming serious. But the archive gives you more than just the numbers. It would let you experience the life of the person who won. You'd feel their shock, their joy, their paranoia as friends and family turned on them, their loneliness after the money ruined every genuine relationship they ever had. You'd live their entire life in an instant. The archive doesn't give you data. It gives you truth. And the truth, doctor, is often more than a person can bear. I stared at him, then back at the suffocating darkness. It was insane. And yet the flashlight, the hum, the sheer, undeniable wrongness of what I was seeing. Prove it, I challenged, my voice steadier than I felt. Vance nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting this. Very well. Think of a question. Something only you could possibly know the answer to. Not a fact you read in a book, but a personal memory. Something so specific and obscure that no database, no private investigator, no one on this planet could ever uncover it. Focus on it. Hold the question in your mind. My mind raced. I thought of my academic failures, my personal secrets, but I needed something more fundamental. Something from before the world had taught me to build walls. I reached back deep into my childhood. A memory surfaced, hazy and coated in the dust of 30 years. A stray Scotty mix I'd found during a thunderstorm. I had snuck him into my room, made him a bed in my closet, and kept him hidden for 2 days before my mother found him. I'd given him a name, a secret name I had never spoken aloud to anyone. Not my parents, not my friends. It was my secret alone. I focused on the question, picturing the dog's matted black fur and bright, intelligent eyes. What was his name? I looked at Vance, my jaw set. He didn't speak. He simply gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod toward the void. The low hum shifted in pitch. It wasn't a sound anymore, but a pressure building inside my skull. The air grew cold, and the smell of wet dog in my mother's cedar-lined closet filled my nostrils. And then a voice spoke. It wasn't Vance's voice. It wasn't a voice at all. It was a thought, planted directly into my consciousness, as clear and certain as my own name. Jasper. I staggered backward, my hand flying to my mouth as a wave of vertigo washed over me. It wasn't just the name. For a fraction of a second, I felt the phantom sensation of coarse, damp fur under my 7-year-old hands. I felt the childish conspiratorial thrill of my secret. I felt the sting of tears when my mom made me take him to the local shelter. I had just relived a week of my childhood in the span of a single heartbeat. I leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, my legs trembling. My God, it's real. It is, Vance said, his voice soft but firm. Now you understand. To access a piece of knowledge is to live it. To learn about the assassination of Caesar, you feel the cold steel of the daggers and the shock of Brutus's betrayal. To understand the composition of a distant nebula, you experience the billion-year process of its formation, the gravitational crush, the nuclear fire. It is pure, unfiltered experience. He took a step closer, his eyes locking onto mine. They were filled with a grave, profound seriousness. This is why it is forbidden, Dr. Finch. The human mind has limits. It's a fragile vessel. Pour too much of the ocean into it and it will shatter. We have lost people to the archive. Minds utterly and irrevocably broken, trapped in an echo of some ancient, alien memory. He let that sink in before delivering the final, chilling truth. Evelyn was fascinated by the concept of origins, the beginning of the universe, the dawn of consciousness, questions no human was ever meant to ask, let alone experience the answer to. She pushed further than anyone ever had before. Vance gestured to the silent, waiting void. The answers you want. The truth of what happened to Evelyn Reed, it's in there. Her final moments, her last discovery. It's all waiting for you as a pristine echo. But to know what she learned, you will have to stand where she stood. You will have to see what she saw. And what she saw was enough to erase her from existence. The air in the chamber grew still, the low hum of the archive fading into an unnerving silence. My own breathing sounded like a storm in the sudden quiet. To stand where she stood, to see what she saw. It wasn't an offer, it was a sentence. The voice, ancient and dispassionate, had laid out the only path forward. To understand Evelyn Reed's disappearance, I had to walk into the very memory that consumed her. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the void. Leaving was impossible. The truth was a hook, and it was buried deep. Taking a steadying breath, I looked at the central console, the source of the voice. "Show me," I said, my own voice barely a whisper, yet it seemed to fill the cavernous space. "I'm ready." For a moment nothing happened. I wondered if I'd been talking to myself, a final descent into madness brought on by isolation and obsession. But then, a low vibration started under my feet. It wasn't a tremor, but a deep resonant thrum, like a string on a colossal instrument had been plucked. The crystalline pillars around me began to glow, not with the cool white light from before, but with a soft ethereal blue. The light pulsed in time with the thrumming, and the air grew thick, heavy with the scent of ozone and something else. Something indescribably ancient, like the smell of starlight itself. The voice spoke again, no longer from a single point but from everywhere at once. It was the walls, the floor, the very air. "The echo is not a recording, Dr. Carter. It is a scar. A wound left upon reality when a consciousness is forcibly removed. We will place you within the contours of that wound. You will feel her thoughts. You will share her final heartbeat. Do you consent?" A test. Another one. Was there a right answer? "I consent," I said, the words feeling heavy, final. The moment I spoke, the blue light from the pillars intensified, bleeding from the crystals and coalescing in the center of the room. It formed a shimmering waist-high pool of liquid light, swirling with impossible colors that my brain couldn't quite categorize. It was beautiful and terrifying. Step into the memory. Step into her end. My legs felt like lead, but they moved one foot in front of the other, carrying me toward the radiant pool. This was it. The point of no return. I reached the edge, the light warming my face. I could feel a strange energy radiating from it, a static charge that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I closed my eyes and stepped forward. There was no splash, no sensation of wetness or temperature. There was only a feeling of profound, instantaneous dislocation. The weight of my own body vanished. The sound of my breathing, the beat of my heart gone. When I opened my eyes, the archive was no more. I was floating in a space that was both infinite and claustrophobic. It wasn't black. It was a tapestry of pure information. All around me, shimmering silver threads twisted and weaved together, forming an endless, intricate lattice that stretched into forever. Some threads glowed with the intensity of suns, others were faint as whispers. I understood, with a certainty that didn't come from my own mind, that I was looking at the source code of the universe. The laws of physics weren't abstract equations here. They were visible, tangible structures. Gravity was a great, slow-moving river of dark energy. Electromagnetism was a crackling, chaotic web of lightning-fast filaments. And I was not alone. In front of me, a faint, translucent outline of a person hovered amongst the cosmic threads. It was Evelyn. Not her body, but the impression of her focus, her attention. I could feel her intellectual curiosity, a burning, insatiable fire. It was her echo. I was seeing this impossible vista through her eyes. Her disembodied thoughts, calm and analytical, echoed in my head. "The patterns are too perfect," she thought. Asterisk, the distribution of prime numbers in quantum foam. The recursive geometry of dark matter filaments. It's elegant. Too elegant. Nature is chaotic. This is designed. Asterisk, I followed her gaze, her attention drifting from the grand architecture to the minutiae. She was examining the very weave of reality, the plank-length knots where space and time were sewn together. She was looking for a signature, for the artist who painted this masterpiece. And then she found it. Our attention snapped to a single point in the infinite lattice. It was a thread just like billions of others, representing a fundamental constant. I felt a jolt of her recognition. The fine structure constant, the number that governs the strength of electromagnetic interaction. It was supposed to be perfect, unchanging, a pillar of our reality. But it wasn't. As we focused on it, we could see it flicker, a stutter. For an infinitesimal moment, the thread would dim, its value fluctuating by a margin so small it would be undetectable by any instrument on Earth. But here, in the engine room of creation, it was as obvious as a crack in a mirror. It was a flaw, a cosmic rounding error. A wave of triumphant discovery washed over me, borrowed from Evelyn's memory. This was it, the proof. The universe wasn't just designed, it was running on flawed hardware. Or it was old, the code beginning to degrade. But as we, continued to observe the flickering thread, the triumph curdled into something else. Ice-cold dread. The flicker wasn't random. It was a rhythm, a pattern. It was a message, repeating over and over in a language of pure mathematics. It was a beacon, or a countdown. Evelyn's borrowed thoughts raced in my mind. Asterisk, it's not decay. It's not an error. It's a watermark. No, not a watermark. It's a backdoor. A vulnerability. Asterisk, she realized, in a moment of soul-shattering clarity, that this tiny flaw wasn't a passive glitch. It was an access point. And by observing it, by understanding it, she had just inserted the key into the lock. The moment the realization hit, the nature of the space changed. The gentle ambient hum of the cosmic lattice was pierced by a new tone. A sharp, discordant frequency that vibrated deep in my bones. The flickering thread we had been observing stopped flickering. It flared, burning with a light so white and so absolute it was like a hole in reality. It was no longer just a piece of the tapestry. It had become aware of our gaze. I felt Evelyn's terror now, pure and undiluted. It was the terror of a mouse realizing the owl on the branch above isn't a part of the scenery. It's a predator. The system, the grand, beautiful, intricate simulation we called the universe, had noticed her. It had noticed a single, inquisitive mind from a speck of dust orbiting a minor star, and it had registered her as an anomaly, a threat. From that burning point of white light, a wave began to expand. But it wasn't made of light or energy or anything I could name. It was a wave of nothing, of pure negation. Where it passed, the shimmering threads of reality didn't break. They simply ceased to be. They were unwritten from existence. It was a deletion protocol, a system purge, and it was moving directly toward us. I was trapped in her final moment, watching her doom approach. I felt her final thought, not as a word but as a pure crystalline concept. Asterisk, it's not a prison. It's a cage. And I just rattled the bars. Asterisk, the wave of uncreation washed closer, silent and absolute. He felt the universe take aim. He was no longer an observer. He was a bug in the code, and the system was about to press delete. The wave was not a thing of energy or matter. It was a wave of absence. It didn't roar or crash. It simply advanced, and reality in its path ceased to be. The marble floor before him didn't crumble. It just wasn't there anymore. The air didn't rush into a vacuum. The vacuum itself was erased. It was the universe holding its breath and refusing to exhale. He could feel his own existence becoming a statistical improbability, a rounding error about to be corrected. The system wasn't just pressing delete, it was dragging him to the cosmic recycling bin. Panic, cold and sharp, cut through his shock. He couldn't run. Where would he run to? Every direction was just another line of code that could be erased. His only hope, his only weapon, was the machine that had condemned him. He scrambled back to the console, his hands shaking so violently he could barely find the keys. The wave of uncreation was 20 feet away, a shimmering curtain of absolute nothing. He had to anchor himself. He had to tie his existence to something the system couldn't or wouldn't delete. A fundamental law, a universal constant. He typed frantically, his mind racing. He searched for the entry on the strong nuclear force, the glue that holds atoms together. If he could somehow write himself into that definition, make his own existence a prerequisite for its function. He found the entry. It was elegant, terrifyingly simple. He tried to edit it, to add a subclause, a footnote, anything. Asterisk, this force is contingent on the continued existence of David Miller. Asterisk, but the console fought him. The letters he typed appeared and then dissolved like smoke. A message flashed on the screen just for a nanosecond. Access denied. System integrity lock. The wave was 10 feet away. He could feel the static of non-existence prickling his skin. His memories of childhood, of his mother's face, of the taste of coffee that morning, they felt thin like old photographs fading in the sun. He was losing. The system's defenses were absolute. He was an unauthorized user making an unauthorized change, and the firewall was perfect. He slumped against the console in despair. It was over. He had touched the mind of God, and for his arrogance, he would be unthought. And then a memory surfaced. Not one of his own, but one from Alastair Finch's journal, a passage he had skimmed over, thinking it was just the ramblings of a paranoid man. It wasn't a warning. It was an instruction manual. Finch had written about a failsafe, a shepherd's key, for a scenario he called a cascade containment failure. He described it as a way to reboot the system from a privileged state, but warned that it was a key that should never ever be turned. It didn't just open a door. It demolished the entire house to build a new one. David didn't care about the house. He just didn't want to be erased with the floorboards. He remembered the string of characters Finch had written next to it, a code that had seemed like nonsense. Lambda 09 Epsilon Shepherd. With the wave of nothingness now close enough to cast a non-shadow on the floor, he typed the sequence. L0-NS. He hit enter. For a moment nothing happened. The wave touched the tip of his shoe. He felt a coldness that had no temperature, a profound and final emptiness spreading up his leg. Then the universe shuddered. The wave of uncreation stopped. It froze in place, a perfectly vertical wall of void. Then, with a sound like a billion panes of glass shattering in absolute silence, it fractured. Cracks of pure light spiderwebbed across its surface, and the entire wave disintegrated into glittering dust that faded away. The warm golden light of the archive vanished, plunged into darkness. Then emergency lights flickered on, casting the cavernous space in a sterile blood-red glow. Alarms, low and guttural, began to sound from the walls themselves. On the console before him, the familiar interface dissolved, replaced by lines of raw code scrolling at an impossible speed. The system was rebooting. A new screen loaded. It was stark black with a single blinking cursor. And then text appeared, typed out by an unseen hand. System reboot complete. Shepherd protocol initiated. User David Miller. Designation changed. Observer-Architect. All safety parameters disabled. Warning. Reality is now writable. A voice echoed through the chamber, but it wasn't the warm, humming presence of the archive. This was cold, synthesized, and utterly devoid of personality. Alastair protocol active, it stated. Welcome, Architect. David stared at the screen, his heart hammering against his ribs. He slowly reached out and touched the keyboard. Before, he could only search and perform minor edits. Now the interface was completely different. It wasn't a search engine. It was a command line. It was the source code. He saw the fundamental laws of physics laid bare, not as descriptions but as editable variables. He could see the entry for the speed of light, and next to it a number he could change. He could see the code that governed the flow of time, the expansion of the universe, the very nature of cause and effect. He had a horrifying, intoxicating thought. He typed a simple command. *create, object, type sphere, material diamond, diameter 1 meter, location 10 meters, bearing 090, *. He hit enter. In the red gloom to his right, the air shimmered. Particles coalesced out of thin air, weaving themselves together like a digital loom. In seconds, a perfect, flawless diamond sphere, 1 meter in diameter, hovered silently in the air, refracting the red emergency lights into 1,000 dazzling points of fire. It was real. He could feel its slight gravitational pull, the way it displaced the air. He hadn't just avoided deletion. Finch's key hadn't just saved him. It had given him the throne. The safety parameters weren't there to protect the user from the archive. They were there to protect the archive and all of reality from the user. The cage wasn't to keep David in. It was to keep him or anyone from getting to this console. He thought of Frank Miller, the man he had unwoven from existence. That had been like using a scalpel. This was a tool that could shatter planets. He could bring Frank back as easily as he had erased him. He could do more. He could make it so Frank had never been born to begin with, or that he had been born a king or a bird. He could write a universe where the very concept of jealousy didn't exist. The power was absolute, terrifying, and it was all his. He looked around at the vast, silent library, now bathed in the ominous red glow. He finally understood. Alastair Finch hadn't been a librarian. He had been a programmer who created an operating system for reality, and then, terrified of what he had built, he had locked away the administrator privileges and thrown away the key. But David had found it. He was no longer a bug in the code. He was the developer. He had full control. And as this profound, terrifying realization settled over him, he knew with chilling certainty that the silent, cosmic system that had tried to delete him was no longer his only enemy. Now anyone who knew what this place was, anyone who coveted this power, like the people who had hunted Sarah, the people who had killed Finch, they would be coming for him. And they wouldn't be trying to delete a bug. They would be trying to seize the kingdom. The thought was an electric shock, colder and more terrifying than anything that had come before. The power that had just saved him was the same power that would get him killed. He was no longer just a loose end for some shadowy agency to snip. He was a king sitting on a throne they desperately wanted. And the only thing standing in their way was his own heartbeat. The silence in the motel room pressed in on him, thick and heavy. Every creak of the building, every distant siren, was a potential assassin. He looked at the laptop, the screen now showing a simple, innocuous desktop. It looked like any other computer, but he knew it was the most dangerous object on the planet. He couldn't run. Running was what a target did. Running meant he was prey, and they were the hunters. But what was the alternative? To fight? How could one man with a laptop fight an organization that could track a single microdot across a city? They had resources, manpower, experience. He had a cryptic machine and a legacy of fear handed down from a dead man. But Finch had survived for years, decades even. He wasn't just running, he was evading. He was playing a game of chess on a global scale, and David was now sitting in his seat, staring at the board, not even knowing the names of the pieces. Finch must have known this day would come. He must have known that one day, someone else would have to take his place. He wouldn't have left his life's work, his life's burden, to chance. He wouldn't have left the kingdom without an instruction manual for the new king. The bug, the chase, Sarah's warning. It had all been a chaotic, terrifying scramble. David had been reacting, surviving moment to moment. Now, for the first time, he had to think. He had to think like Finch. Where would a man like that hide his secrets? Not on the laptop itself, that was too obvious. The archive was the tool, not the manual. It had to be somewhere physical, somewhere personal. And there was only one place that was truly Finch's: his apartment. The idea was insane. The organization had to have it under surveillance. Going back there was walking directly into the lion's den. But staying put was just waiting for the lions to come to him. At least in the den, there might be a weapon waiting for him. He packed his few belongings, his hands trembling slightly. He slid the laptop into his backpack, the weight of it feeling like a slab of concrete. Every step out of the motel room was a gamble. He scanned the parking lot, his eyes darting from car to car, face to face. Was that man reading a newspaper just a traveler? Was the woman on her phone coordinating a strike team? The paranoia was a physical thing, a film of sweat on his skin. He bought a ticket for a bus heading in the opposite direction of the city, only to get off 3 stops later, hailing a cab to take him back toward the center of town. He paid in cash, got out 6 blocks from Finch's building, and walked the rest of the way, taking a winding, nonsensical route through alleys and side streets. The building looked the same, a quiet, brick monolith indifferent to the drama unfolding around it. He used the key Finch had given him, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The lobby was empty. The ride up in the ancient, groaning elevator was the longest minute of his life. He half expected the doors to open to a team of armed agents, but they opened to an empty, silent hallway. He reached Finch's door, number 7B. He paused, listening. Nothing. He slid the key into the lock, turned it, and pushed the door open. The apartment was exactly as he'd left it. Dusty, cluttered, smelling of old paper and stale coffee. It was a time capsule of a man's obsession. Books were stacked on every surface, vinyl records were piled in precarious towers, and strange, archaic-looking charts were pinned to a corkboard on the wall. The place hadn't been tossed. There were no signs of a forced entry, no indication that anyone had been there. Maybe they thought Finch's secrets had died with him, or maybe they were just patient. David didn't know what he was looking for. A hidden journal? A safe? A loose floorboard? He started searching, trying to be methodical. He ran his hands along the spines of the books, checked inside the record sleeves, tapped on the walls. Nothing. It was just an old man's messy apartment. Frustration began to build. Had he risked everything for nothing? Was he just projecting his own desperate hope onto this place? He sank into Finch's worn armchair, the one facing the wall of vinyl records. His eyes scanned the thousands of spines. Classical, jazz, obscure folk artists from the 60s. It was Finch's one true passion outside of his work. Or was it? Finch wasn't a man of frivolous hobbies. Everything he did seemed to have a purpose, a hidden layer of meaning. David's gaze drifted over the collection, and then it stopped. Among the alphabetized artists, one record was out of place. It was a thin black sleeve with no text, tucked between a Frank Sinatra album and a collection by Thelonious Monk. Didn't belong. He pulled it out. The sleeve was plain, but the record inside was unusual. It wasn't a standard vinyl LP. It was an acetate disc, the kind used for making demos or master recordings. A single white label was stuck to the center. On it, in Finch's spidery handwriting, were 3 words. The first query. His breath caught in his throat. This was it. This had to be it. He gently placed the disc on Finch's old turntable, lowered the needle, and held his breath. He expected to hear Finch's voice, a recorded message from beyond the grave. But there was only silence. A faint crackle, the hiss of the needle on the groove, but no sound. He let it play for a full minute. Nothing. He lifted the needle, confused. Was it a dud? A red herring? He looked closer at the record itself. Under the lamplight, he could see the grooves cut into the acetate. But something was wrong. They weren't a continuous spiral like a normal record. They were broken, disjointed. There were patterned sections of deep grooves followed by smooth, untouched space. It wasn't music. It was code. It was data etched into a physical object. He remembered Finch talking about the earliest forms of computing, about punch cards and magnetic tape. Finch was an analog man living in a digital world. Of course his user manual would be this. But how to read it? He looked around the room, his eyes now searching with a new purpose. He wasn't looking for a hiding place, he was looking for a key. His gaze fell upon the charts pinned to the corkboard. They were covered in astronomical symbols, mathematical equations, and what looked like linguistic diagrams. To David, they were gibberish. But one chart stood out. It was a circular diagram like a compass rose, but instead of north, south, east, and west, it had strange runic-looking symbols. And in the center, in that same spidery handwriting, was a title. The Syntax of Reality. It was a cipher. The record was the encoded message, and this chart was the key to decrypting it. The patterns on the record, the long grooves, the short grooves, the spaces, they corresponded to the symbols on the chart. It was a language. The language of the archive. David spent the next hour hunched over the turntable and the chart, painstakingly translating the physical patterns into the symbols. The symbols, in turn, corresponded to concepts. It wasn't a simple A equals 1, B equals 2 code. It was far more complex, a language based on logic and intent. He learned that the archive didn't respond to simple commands like a search engine. It responded to structured queries, sentences built with a specific syntax. There were nouns, which were the objects or concepts to be affected. There were verbs, which were the actions, but not simple actions like delete. They were words like unmake, reveal, sever, bind. And most importantly, there were modifiers, conditions that prevented catastrophic paradoxes. You couldn't just unmake a person. The system wouldn't allow it. The resulting paradox would be too great. But you could sever connection between a person and a specific object, or reveal location of an individual based on a defined intent. It was terrifying and exhilarating. He had been playing with a nuclear weapon by just whacking it with a hammer. Now, he was beginning to understand the control panel. He had to test it. He had to know if this was real. He went to the laptop, the backpack resting on the floor beside him. He opened it up, the familiar, empty interface appearing on the screen. He thought for a moment, his mind racing. He couldn't do anything drastic. He needed to try something small, something verifiable. He needed to know who was hunting him. Not the name of their organization, but the people themselves, the ones on the ground. Following the syntax he had just deciphered, he began to type. He constructed the query carefully, just as the chart instructed. He defined the noun, the individual. He added the modifier, whose primary active intent is to secure the archive. He added a second modifier for proximity, within a 1-mile radius. And then the verb, reveal location. He took a deep breath, his finger hovering over the enter key. This was the moment of truth. He pressed it. For a second, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered. A map loomed into existence, a detailed schematic of the city blocks surrounding Finch's building. And on the map, a single pulsing red dot appeared. David's blood ran cold. It wasn't in a car on the street. It wasn't in the building across the way. The dot was inside his building. And it was moving. It was ascending floor by floor, directly towards apartment 7B. For a few seconds nobody moved. The pulsing red dot on David's phone was a phantom heartbeat counting down their final moments. Third floor. Fourth. Michael was the first to break the paralysis. He lunged for the front door, his face a mask of grim determination, and threw the heavy deadbolt. He then slammed the security chain into its slot. It felt like putting a bandage on a mortal wound. "What is that?" Emily whispered, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Who is that?" "I don't know," David said, his voice strained. "But they're not here to sell cookies." The dot blinked. Fifth floor. "The window," Michael said, his voice low and urgent. "The fire escape." Now. David's apartment was on the corner of the building. The fire escape was outside the master bedroom window, a rickety skeleton of iron bolted to the brickwork. It was their only other way out. They scrambled into the bedroom, the city lights painting a deceptively peaceful scene below. Michael wrestled with the old window sash. It was painted shut, sealed by years of humidity and neglect. He grunted, putting his shoulder into it, but it wouldn't budge. The dot on David's phone pulsed. Sixth floor. "It's no good," Michael hissed, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's sealed." Panic, cold and sharp, began to set in. They were trapped. Seventh floor. The dot stopped moving. It was on their level. It was in the hallway just outside their door. David killed the lights in the apartment, plunging them into a near-total darkness, illuminated only by the glow of his phone and the city beyond the glass. They stood frozen in the center of the living room, a triangle of terrified silence, listening. The building's old ventilation system hummed. A siren wailed somewhere far off in the city, but in the hallway there was nothing. No footsteps, no rattling of the doorknob, just an unnerving absolute stillness. Maybe the tracker was wrong. Maybe it was a glitch. For a fleeting, hopeful moment, David allowed himself to believe they were safe. Then came the knock. It wasn't a frantic pounding or the heavy thud of a police raid. It was two soft, polite taps on the wood of the door. Knock, knock. As if a neighbor had come to borrow a cup of sugar. The casual, civilized sound was 1,000 times more terrifying than a battering ram. Spoke of confidence. Of a predator that knew its prey was cornered and had nowhere left to run. They held their breath, their hearts hammering against their ribs. A voice slid through the door, smooth and calm, with no discernible accent. It was a voice accustomed to being obeyed. "Mr. Hayes, Emily, Michael, we know you're all in there. We don't want to cause any unnecessary damage to the property, or to you." David's mind reeled. They knew all their names. The voice continued, its tone maddeningly reasonable. "You have something that belongs to us. A piece of a much larger collection. We're not here to harm you. We are simply here to retrieve our property. Open the door, and this can all be over." Michael shot David a look that said, "Not a chance in hell." Emily clutched the edge of a bookshelf, her knuckles white. "Who are you?" David called out, his voice cracking slightly. There was a short pause. "Let's just say we're librarians," the voice replied, a hint of amusement in its tone. "And you have a book that is long overdue. You have 30 seconds to open the door." 30 seconds. It was an ultimatum, not a negotiation. David looked from the barricaded door to the sealed window. They were in a cage of his own making. His eyes fell on his laptop, still open on the coffee table, displaying the translated text from the tablet. Emily followed his gaze. "The text," she whispered, her mind racing. "It mentioned guardians. It said, 'Where the knowledge is kept, the wardens stand watch. They are the lock, and they are the key.'" It was a fragment, a piece of lore they glossed over. But what did it mean? 10 seconds. The voice from the hall announced, its calm demeanor evaporating, replaced by a cold edge of impatience. "David, what do we do?" Emily pleaded. Before he could answer, a low hum started to emanate from the door. It was a high-frequency sound that made the fillings in their teeth ache. David crept closer, peering through the peephole. He saw nothing but the empty, dimly lit hallway, but the sound was getting louder, and a strange orange light was beginning to form around the edges of the deadbolt. "Move back," David yelled, shoving Michael and Emily away from the door. He looked through the peephole again. The metal of the lock was glowing, turning a bright, molten orange. It was melting. Not from a blowtorch, but from some kind of focused energy. The technology was beyond anything he had ever seen. The wood around the lock began to smoke, the smell of burning paint filling the small apartment. This was it. They had seconds. As Michael frantically looked for anything to use as a weapon, a heavy lamp, a fire poker, David's mind flashed back to the library. The symbol on the floor. The interlocking circles bisected by a single straight line. He remembered how the tablet had resonated with it, how the air itself had seemed to hum when he stood over it. The tablet. It was still in his backpack by the couch. It was a crazy, desperate, impossible idea. A leap of faith based on a half-remembered sensation and a cryptic piece of ancient text. But it was the only idea they had left. "The symbol!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the rising panic. "Emily, the symbol from the library floor." Emily's eyes widened in understanding. While David fumbled in his backpack, she grabbed a permanent marker from a cup of pins on his desk. The reinforced steel of the deadbolt was now sagging, dripping molten metal onto the floor. The door groaned, beginning to buckle inward. "Here!" Emily tossed him the marker. David dropped to his knees on the hardwood floor of his living room. His hands were shaking, but his mind was crystal clear. He uncapped the marker and began to draw, trying to replicate the ancient design from memory. A perfect circle, then another overlapping the first. The geometry had to be precise. He could feel the heat from the door on his back. He could hear the metal shrieking as it gave way. "David, hurry!" Michael yelled, positioning himself between David and the door, holding a heavy floor lamp like a baseball bat. David's marker flew across the floor, creating the last part of the symbol, the sharp, straight line that cut through the center of the interlocking circles. The door lock finally failed, dissolving into a shower of white-hot sparks. The chain snapped like a piece of thread. With a deafening crack, the door flew open, slamming against the interior wall. 3 figures stood silhouetted in the doorway, clad in dark tactical gear, their faces obscured by sleek, featureless helmets. They raised weapons that looked nothing like conventional firearms. At the exact same moment, David pressed the tip of the marker down, completing the final line of the symbol, and the world went silent. The air in the apartment grew heavy, thick, and cold. The symbol on the floor began to glow, not with an angry orange heat, but with a soft, ethereal blue light that pulsed with a slow, silent rhythm. It expanded, washing over them, and the 3 figures in the doorway froze, their weapons lowered slightly, as if they were suddenly trying to push their way through invisible water. The light wasn't just light, it was something else, something ancient and powerful, woken from a long slumber, and it was now filling the entire room. It pushed against my skin, a pressure that was both physical and mental. It was like standing at the bottom of an ocean of pure thought. The armed guards were statues, their faces slack, eyes wide and unfocused. They weren't seeing the room anymore. They were seeing everything. Their minds, unprepared and unprotected, had been thrown open to a raw, unfiltered stream of cosmic data. I could almost feel the psychic scream as their consciousness was shredded and dissolved by the sheer volume of it all. Sarah, the agent, was on one knee, her pistol clattering to the floor. She gritted her teeth, sweat beading on her forehead. Her training, whatever it was giving her a fighting chance. She was trying to build walls in her mind, to shield herself from the torrent, but I could see the cracks forming. She was holding on by a thread. But David was the source. The light wasn't just coming from the artifact. It was flowing through him. His body was a conduit, a lens focusing this impossible energy. His eyes were no longer his own. They were twin stars burning with a cold, white fire, and in their depths I saw galaxies being born and dying. He wasn't in pain. It was something far beyond pain. He was being unmade and remade all at once. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Instead, a wave of understanding washed over me. A silent broadcast directly into my mind. I saw it. I saw what the archive truly was. It wasn't a library. It wasn't a hard drive of alien information. It was a seed of a consciousness that was ancient beyond measure. A being that didn't experience reality, it was reality. It had slumbered for eons, waiting for a compatible host, a nervous system complex enough to serve as a bridge, a gateway. And we had just woken it up. A voice, sharp and clinical, crackled through the intercom system, cutting through the overwhelming mental silence. It was the director. He wasn't shouting or panicked. He sounded satisfied. "Magnificent, isn't it, Emily?" he said, his voice calm, almost reverent. "For decades, we tried to translate it. We used supercomputers, quantum processors, we treated it like a code to be broken. We were fools. We were trying to read a symphony with a calculator." I looked towards the darkened observation window, my heart turning to ice. He was watching this. He had planned for this. "The archive was never meant to be read," the director continued, his voice echoing in the silent room. "It was meant to be integrated. It doesn't store knowledge, it is knowledge. The only way to access it is to become it, to offer it a vessel." His words hit me with the force of a physical blow. The recruitment, the tests, the careful selection of David for this specific project. It was never about his linguistic skills or his academic background. It was about his mind, his unique neural architecture. He wasn't an employee. He was the key. He was the sacrifice. "We mapped his entire life, Emily," the director said, a chilling pride in his tone. "We knew he was the one from the moment our algorithms flagged him in college. His mind has the perfect balance of plasticity and structure, strong enough to receive the signal, but malleable enough to be rewritten. He is becoming the first true post-human, a living library of everything." The light around David intensified, the air shimmering with heat. He slowly began to float, rising a few inches off the floor, his body held aloft by a power that defied gravity. He was the epicenter of a storm that was rewriting the laws of physics in this room. "David!" I screamed, my voice raw. I took a step towards him, but the mental pressure doubled, forcing me to my knees. It felt like a giant hand was pressing down on my soul. "It's too late for that," the director's voice said, devoid of any empathy. "There is no more David. There is only the archive. Our only task now is containment. Agent Sarah, your orders stand. Secure the asset." I watched as Sarah struggled to her feet. Her face was pale, her expression a mask of agony and confusion. She looked from the floating, incandescent form of David to me, and then towards the observation window. The director's words hung in the air. Secure the asset. She had been a pawn just like us. She thought she was on a recovery mission. She was actually an escort, delivering the offering to the altar. She slowly bent down, her hand trembling as she reached for her weapon. For a second, I thought she was going to follow her orders, that she would try to subdue David or worse, me. But she didn't pick it up. She just stared at it, then back at the man who was no longer a man. He's going to burn out," she managed to say, her voice strained. "The human body can't handle this. It's too much. A necessary and acceptable risk," the director replied coolly. "The vessel may be temporary, but the knowledge we can extract before it expires will change the course of human history." Rage, pure and undiluted, cut through my fear. This wasn't for science. This wasn't for humanity. This was for power. They were destroying the man I cared for, atomizing his very soul, just to get a peek at the answers to the universe. I had to do something. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let David just fade away. I focused on him, pushing past the psychic wall of force. I thought about everything we'd been through. The late nights in the lab, the shared coffee, the quiet jokes, the spark I'd felt from the moment I met him. I poured all of it out, a desperate, silent plea. "David, fight it. Don't let it take you. It's me, Emily. Come back." For a moment, the blinding light flickered. The impossible chorus of thoughts in my head quieted by a fraction. And through the inferno, I saw his face. Just for a second. It was him. And he was terrified. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw an ageless, trapped soul begging for release. Then the light surged back, brighter than before. The floating body of David turned its head, not towards me, but towards the observation window. And it spoke. It wasn't David's voice. It was a million voices speaking in perfect, terrifying unison. It was the sound of stars grinding together, of tectonic plates shifting, of thoughts that had existed before time. The words it spoke were not in any human language, but I understood them perfectly, as did everyone in the room. The knowledge was imprinted directly into our minds. "The conduit is unstable," the chorus boomed, a soundless thunder that shook the very foundations of the facility. "But the transfer is proceeding." The director was silent. This was clearly not part of his plan. The being that was David then turned its gaze to Sarah. She flinched, taking a step back. "We are aware of your presence," the voice continued, its tone shifting. a note of something ancient and analytical entering the chorus. The other, the failed vessel, the echo. Sarah's eyes widened in sheer terror. She looked down at her own hands as if seeing them for the first time. The director's voice came back over the intercom, now laced with genuine panic. "Agent, what is it talking about? What echo?" But Sarah didn't answer. She was staring at David, a horrified recognition dawning on her face. And as I looked closer, I saw it too. A faint, almost imperceptible shimmering in the air around her. A subtle distortion like heat haze on a summer road. She wasn't just an agent. She had a history with this thing. She had been exposed before. The chorus of voices spoke one final time, its gaze locked on her. "They sent you to collect the new host. A mistake. An echo cannot contain a voice. It can only be shattered by it." And with that, the shimmering around Sarah erupted. She screamed, a raw human sound of pure agony, as a faint ghostly white light began to pour from her eyes and mouth. She wasn't being filled with knowledge like David. She was being emptied. The archive, in its new, powerful form, was pulling the fragment of itself that had lodged in her years ago, tearing it out, and her mind and soul along with it. She was coming apart at the seams, a terrifying mirror to David's ascension. The director had made a fatal miscalculation. He hadn't just sent an agent to retrieve his prize. He had sent a ghost to the one thing in the universe that could destroy it. The energy pouring from Evelyn was a raw, unfiltered scream that tore at the fabric of the observatory. Metal groaned, glass spiderwebbed, and the very air grew thin and sharp, tasting of ozone and forgotten time. David felt the archive recoiling, not in aggression, but in a kind of sympathetic agony. It was like watching a wound that had been scarred over for decades suddenly rip open. He saw what the director, in his cold, sterile command center, was only just beginning to comprehend. Evelyn wasn't a weapon aimed at the archive. She was a paradox, a living, breathing temporal anomaly left behind from a past catastrophe. Her parents, brilliant physicists obsessed with tapping into the universe's baseline code, had found a fissure leading to the archive. But they hadn't approached it with reverence. They had tried to pry it open, to harness it. In response, to prevent a reality-ending paradox they had nearly triggered, the archive had done the only thing it could. It hadn't erased them. It had absorbed them. It had folded them into itself to stabilize the timeline. But in their final, desperate moments, they had shielded their daughter, pushing her out of the event, leaving her stranded on the shores of reality. A ghost. An echo of a choice that could not be unmade. And the director had found this echo, this traumatized child, and sharpened her pain into a blade. For years, he had pointed her at his enemies, never knowing that her very existence was a splinter in the side of creation. Now, he had pointed her back at the source of her trauma, and reality itself was beginning to unravel. Hundreds of miles away, alarms shrieked in the director's ears. Every monitor tracking the observatory flared white, the data streams turning to pure, incomprehensible noise. "Pull back," he roared into his comms. "All teams, pull back now. Abort. Abort." But his voice was a whisper against a hurricane. He watched in horror as the energy signature didn't just grow. It folded in on itself, achieving a density that his instruments couldn't even measure. It was the mathematical equivalent of a black hole, but it wasn't consuming matter. It was consuming causality. His fatal miscalculation wasn't just a strategic error. It was a challenge to the laws of physics, and he was about to lose. Inside the dome, David saw all of this in a flash of terrible, perfect clarity. He saw the little girl, Evelyn, hiding under a console as light consumed her parents. He saw her lonely years in a consortium facility, her grief twisted into loyalty. He saw her entire life, a monument to a single unbearable moment of loss. The archive wasn't attacking her. It was trying to resolve her, to fix the equation she represented. It was a cosmic immune response, and the only logical outcome was her cancellation, her erasure. David felt the immense power of the archive coalesce around him, offering him the final say. He could use its power to force the issue. He could cut the thread, sever Evelyn from her past, and let her dissolve into nothingness. The paradox would be resolved. The storm would end. It would be efficient. It was the choice the director would have made. But David wasn't the director. He was a librarian. His purpose was not to destroy information but to understand it. And Evelyn Reed was not a broken weapon. She was a story that had never been given an ending. He took a step forward, into the storm of light and memory. The force pushed against him, a physical pressure that threatened to peel him apart atom by atom. He ignored it. He focused on the consciousness of the archive not as a tool but as a partner. He didn't command it. He asked it. He reached out not to sever the connection but to become a bridge. He pushed through the swirling chaos until he was standing in front of her. Evelyn was on her knees, her face a mask of terror and confusion, her eyes seeing ghosts he could only imagine. He reached out his hand. He didn't speak with his mouth. He spoke with his mind, using the archive as his voice, a voice that echoed not in her ears, but in the deepest parts of her soul. They didn't leave you, he sent. Asterisk, they saved you, and they are not gone. They're waiting. Asterisk, through his connection he showed her. He opened a door that had been sealed for 20 years. He showed her her parents, not as ghosts, but as beings of pure information and energy, living inside the infinite silent library of the archive. They were preserved, whole, at peace. They were the 2 books that had been returned to the shelf to save the entire library from burning down. The storm faltered. The screaming light softened to a gentle glow. For the first time, Evelyn's eyes focused on him, truly seeing him. The hardened agent was gone, replaced by the little girl who had lost everything. In his eyes, she saw not an enemy, but an offer. An ending to her story. An epilogue she never knew was possible. Tears streamed down her face, washing away 2 decades of pain. She reached out and took his hand. The moment their fingers touched, the light collapsed. But it wasn't an explosion. It was an inhalation. Quiet, perfect final breath. All the energy, all the memory, all the pain flowed into Evelyn, and then with a sigh that made no sound, she was gone. Not erased, not destroyed, reunited. The paradox was solved. The ghost had found her peace. The book had been returned to the library. In his command center, the director saw the energy signature vanish. For a single fleeting second, he felt a surge of triumph. He had survived. But then a new icon blinked on his screen. The data stream from the observatory had stabilized, and it was flowing backwards. David walked over to a dusty terminal, the only one that hadn't been destroyed. He sat down, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He was, and always had been, a librarian. And a librarian's job is not to write the books himself. It is to make sure the right books get into the right hands at the right time. He didn't hide the archive. He didn't destroy it. He began the slow, careful, and deliberate process of returning it to the world. A forgotten formula for a miracle antibiotic was anonymously emailed to a struggling researcher in Brazil. The complex equations for sustainable fusion energy appeared in the margins of a graduate student's forgotten notebook in Germany. A lost symphony, a masterpiece of human emotion, was found in a box of sheet music in a New Orleans attic. He didn't give humanity answers. He gave them clues. He nurtured discovery, not decree. He let them find the path themselves, gently nudging them away from the forbidden knowledge, the weapons and the tools of control, and toward wisdom. David, the man who could have been a god, chose to remain a librarian. He became the world's quietest guardian, its most invisible benefactor, operating from a small, unassuming office somewhere no one would ever think to look. He was surrounded by the simple comfort of paper and ink, but in his eyes, if you looked close enough, you could see the light of a billion stars.